Hi, everybody. My name's Adam Carpenter, and I lead the Developer Growth Consulting Initiative at Google Play. For anyone who's not familiar with it, what growth consulting does is take all of the data and all of the insights that we have here at Google, blends them with my own team's expertise from industry, and we leverage that to help identify opportunities in each of your games and apps businesses. It's an incredibly rewarding role because it allows me to provide a lot of guidance and a lot of insights that can help you identify what's the lowest hanging fruit in your businesses and where's the biggest opportunity for growth and improvement. Additionally, I also work closely with our product and engineering teams to both provide guidance about what kind of messaging we're sharing that resonates best with developers, as well as provides a lot of feedback based on what developers are telling us they need or would provide the best business advantages. And today, I'm lucky to be joined on stage with three of our experts. Corina, who's one of the lead engineers on our console team's benchmarking project, Fergus, who's one of the primary PMs responsible for benchmarking and vitals, and Tom, who's been instrumental with our core metrics opportunities. And over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about some of the frameworks that I like to leverage when I think about business growth and understanding game and app performance. And additionally, my colleagues are going to share some of the new features and tooling that we've implemented in the console that you'll be able to leverage to understand how your game or app is performing, understand what good look like, and understand where you could potentially optimize and grow your businesses. All of us are very, very passionate about business growth, and it's really exciting to be here today. And so when I think about ecosystems, it's kind of an exceptionally broad concept. Because at the highest level, you have this concept of games, you have this concept of apps, and they're so vastly different. And even when you begin to look at what apps are themselves, we have a whole host of categories, we have genres within categories, and if you think about apps like New York Times, Snap, Kakao Talk, Waze, CNN, each of them is fundamentally different in terms of how they operate, the value that they provide to users, the types of metrics that they look at, and potentially even the North Stars that they aim for. But despite all of those differences, there are commonalities across all of them. The low-level fundamental metrics that each app kind of looks at, that's a commonality that we can actually understand, we can see here at Google, and therefore it enables us to actually build tooling around that to provide better opportunity identification and guidance to you, our fellow developers, so that you're better equipped to understand how you're performing. And so whenever I think about business growth, especially when I'm working with a new developer, I always like to construct like a hierarchical model which looks at what is the developer's top-level goal, and then what are all the KPIs or all the metrics that feed up into it. It's a little bit of an engineering mindset, and for me it comes from being a chemical engineer. Because the way I think about engineering, it's take a problem, break it down into all of its core components, understand how all of them work, understand how all of them interrelate, and by gaining that understanding, you can build it back up to a full solution. And so the key kind of opportunity to optimize your business, no matter how complex it is understanding how all of these components and all of these facets fit together. And so in terms of consultations, being able to look at this allows me to better understand the business and be able to support its growth and continued success over time. And so to give you kind of a concrete example of this, I'll talk about something that I think is universally applicable to everybody in this room. And it's thinking about what is the audience of your game or your app. And in the context of this discussion, what I mean by audience, I'm really talking about all of the Android users around the entire globe who have your game or your app installed. And if you think about that audience, you can start to break it apart into two different sections. The first being your active users. Whether your most meaningful unit of time is daily, weekly, or monthly, who are those users that are coming back at that frequency? And on the opposite side, then you have all of those users who've churned out of your app. They haven't been active in the recent past, but they do still have it installed on their device. So they do make up that full kind of your audience portion. And then each of these you can decompose even further. Your active users, this is largely the new users who are coming into your app or your game for the very first time each day, or they're the returning users, your regular users who are coming back on a frequent basis. And on the flip side, when we think about those churned users, it's really important to understand what's potentially driving them out of the game, what kind of technical performance issues are maybe causing a poor user experience, causing them to leave the app. And so what our team has been doing is working really hard to uncover a lot of these insights, expose them into the console to enable you all to make better business decisions. And to tell us a lot more about what we're actually building and what you'll be able to get access to, I'd like to welcome Tom to talk.
Thanks, Adam. Good afternoon, everyone. As said, my name is Tom. I'm a product manager. I specialize in core metrics. So these are the really, really fundamental, foundational metrics of your app and game businesses. These are things like installs and uninstalls, user acquisition, and user churn. Now, I love how, well, actually, Adam, I just love how your brain works. I love this kind of model. I used to be an app developer, and we used to use these to really understand how we could optimize our businesses. But any model like this is only as useful as the data that you plug into it. Because it's a great way of thinking, but to make it work for you, you need fantastic metrics. Now, when I look at this, I can already see parts of the model that, frankly, the Play console right now is not great at giving you data for. Returning users, for instance. Today, you can't get returning user data in the console. And that's a problem. It's a problem because the app ecosystem has evolved and moved on. When we look at global data, we see that on average, between 20 and 25% of all installs are returning installers. These are people who have installed you before, uninstalled, and decided to give you a second go. That's an average as well, so for some of you, that percentage is going to be much, much higher. If you want to understand your active users and how you acquire users, you need to understand these kind of metrics. That's why teams in London have been working for the last 2 years to redefine and completely redevelop some of our base metrics. And we've been doing it so we can get all of you the information you need to make better decisions. I want to explain how we've approached it. Deep down, we've aimed to make our new metrics understandable, predictable, more granular, and more useful. And they all start with one of two things. Do you really want to measure users, people, and by users at the moment, we mean signed-in Google users to Play, so one of the most useful and persistent identifiers on the web, or are you looking for devices, like Android IDs? That's the beginning of our new metrics, but it's nowhere near the end. Because the next thing we want to enable you to do is to decide if you want to find out if you've acquired or lost a user or device. Have they installed you or have they uninstalled you? But then after that, we want to give you more information. So with our new metric sets, you'll be able to choose whether you're measuring literally every person, only new users, or only returning users. You'll also be able to decide what you're actually counting. Are you counting uniques, individual users and individual devices? Or are you counting events, every time something happens, so every time a device is acquired or not? Or are you counting actives, who actually has you installed right now? And then lastly, we want to make it much easier, especially for the business decision makers amongst you, to be able to aggregate this data in ways that match your business cadence. So our new metrics are going to be available from hourly up to calendar quarterly granularities. And if you're selecting uniques, we're going to dedupe over those times as well. This is giving you a level of insight into what people are doing, how they're acquiring you, and if they're churning out, that we've not been able to give you before, but one that you absolutely need, and we understand that. And all of these are going to be available across the dimensions that we already provide. So by device, by country, by app version, and also by a couple of new ones as well. My favorite is install method, because Play can report on things that sometimes others can't. So we're going to start telling you which of your installs are pre-installed, organically came through Play, with our peer-to-peer or other acquisition methods as well. So if you imagine that one day your VP comes up to you and she asks how many times you uninstalled on a specific day, you can easily answer that question by configuring your metrics. You can look at how many devices you lost on a day, and you're measuring events. But similarly, let's imagine that she asked, how many users did you win back last month? Something that we've never been able to give you insight on before. Well, with the new metric sets, you can predictably answer that as well. So you can select, well, I'm interested in returning users acquired, unique, for the last month. This is how simple and how clear we want to make these complex metrics. And it's also worth saying that all of these subscribe to very stringent user privacy as well. So we're doing this within the bounds of Android's strong privacy models. Now, we've taken the way to think about these metrics, and we've instituted it directly into the stats page. This is one of the most powerful metric pages on the console. So, just like today, you'll be able to select up to 2 metrics that you can compare. But then, we instituted the model that I just spoke you through. So, you'll be able to select whether you're looking at new or returning users or devices. You'll also be able to choose whether you're measuring events or uniques. Similarly, you'll be able to choose the granularity that you're deduping over. And you'll be able to apply new metrics calculations. So you'll be able to look at just the per-interval data, the cumulative data from the beginning of time, or 30-day rolling averages to really help you remove noise and spot trends. Now, these metrics can be complex. We hope they're really, really helpful. But after you've found the one that you really want and the one that you want to come back to again and again and again, we want to make it easy for you to use that. So the stats page is also going to have suggestive reports and saved reports as well. These allow you to quickly jump to the things that you're looking for and even name them in a way that's sensible to you. As you can see, I quite like using my emojis. Now, we've been working on this for ages, and all of them are going to be launched over the next couple of months.
And so this type of data can really power the type of insights that I was talking about. And a lot of the developers we've been testing it with have been really excited about what it's enabled. And like Francesco from Budge, it's really amazing to see how developers can take advantage of the types of information we're able to present in the console. But it's one of these things that, like Tom, more data is good, but data by itself isn't necessarily as meaningful. What developers really need, especially business leaders and decision makers, is data in context, which is really information. Because information can actually empower leaders to make meaningful business decisions that will actually result in a positive impact.
Right, no, I completely get that, right? So the data is the beginning of your understanding, but it's not the end. And one of the things that we've done is talk to a lot of developers about common modes of analysis that you also do with play data. And we're baking some of those analyses directly into the product as well. So if we scroll down the new statistics page, you can find, I think this is my favorite chart on the console at the moment, the brand new change analysis chart. What this does is takes the dimension that you've selected for your metrics, the beginning of your period and the end of your period, and nets the difference. Basically, it's a really quick, easy way to see which were the biggest movers over a period of time. So in this example, which countries change most with my active users. It's a really quick, simple way to understand what the data is trying to tell you. And what the data tells you is really telling you what Android users are trying to tell you, which is how they acquire and how they churn out of your app.
Yeah. And this is kind of great because this is something that you all, if inclined, could work into the type of hierarchical model that I was discussing before. And it's important to actually really see how can you leverage the value that Google provides to better understand your business. But to be a bit blunt, Tom, it's kind of one thing to see your own performance, but that's only kind of half the story, because while developers can benchmark against themselves and try to guess at how you're doing, maybe relative to your own metrics, maybe relative to one of your other apps, it'd be much more powerful if developers could actually see how they compared against their top peers.
Right, I completely get that, and thanks for being blunt. Yeah, so your data is always useful to you, but context is even more useful, because context helps you understand what your data looks like compared to a much, much broader ecosystem of information. Now, this leads us on to what I think is an amazing, fantastic product. I could talk about it for ages, but I'm not the best person to do so, because Corina here has been leading our teams working on ecosystem benchmarks. So I'd like to hand over to her to tell you all about it.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. I'm Corina, and I'm an engineer on the Play console. So I'll tell you about some of the great insights you can get from benchmarks. Now, as Adam and Tom mentioned, imagine you're trying to assess how your app is doing. So you go in the Play console, and you look, for instance, at your user acquisition and your user loss. If this is what you see, what do these graphs tell you? Well, your user acquisition is going up, so that's good, right? That means you're doing well. But your user loss is also going up. So what does that mean? Maybe that's not so good, because you'd ideally want to retain users and not lose them. This is where benchmarks can be very useful, because they can add context to these numbers and help you evaluate these trends. Now let's look at your performance if we compare it next to a benchmark. In this case, you can see that your acquisition is not only doing well, it's actually doing really well. because your acquisition is going upwards, even though the benchmark is going downwards. This means you're doing much better in this area, so it's a good reason for you to celebrate and probably not invest or focus too much. And for user loss, you also see a positive sign this time, because even though it is going upwards, it's doing so at a slower rate than the benchmark. And this is where I find that benchmarks can give you really interesting insights. What this probably means is that there is limited opportunity in the market in this area, because the trend that you see, it's common to the wider market, and it's not something that is specific to your app. So in this example, you can see how benchmarks help you get an overall positive picture of your performance. But now, imagine that your performance is still exactly the same, and the benchmark instead looks like this. In this case, your acquisition is going upwards, but is doing so at a slower rate than the benchmark. Now, the difference might be pretty tiny today, but if this trend continues, that difference will increase. So you probably want to monitor this area and start thinking about how you can address it. And this time, your user loss is actually not doing that well, because your user loss is going upwards, but the benchmark is going downwards in this area. This shows that there's a big opportunity here for you and a lot of headroom for improvement. And this is exactly what benchmarks highlight in these examples: the areas with opportunity in the market and how large these opportunities are. So it can hopefully help you prioritize the things you want to focus on next. But there's one challenge in benchmarks. Comparing absolute numbers of acquisition and loss might not always be the right or the best thing to do. To address this issue, we're also working on calculating change rates. Change rates are relative differences of a metric from one period to the next. We will calculate this on all of the metric configurations that Tom mentioned earlier. And we will also add benchmarks for all of these change rates. And hopefully, with all these additions, we'll be able to give you better context on how your app grows over time, but also a meaningful comparison that you can use to assess that growth. So when all this is available, here are some examples of the kind of insights and analysis you'll be able to get from the Play console. For instance, you'll be able to compare how quickly you're acquiring users, or you'll be able to check if your uninstall rates are abnormally high, or even compare how your growth performs versus the benchmark in specific countries or on some specific devices.
So like benchmarks are really cool, but they're only as valuable as the set of peers you have to compare yourself in with. It's a little bit like garbage in, garbage out. What are we doing to kind of give the developers more actionable insights?
I think that's a great point, and that's where I personally find benchmarks really exciting. Because what we have done is use all the understanding and the metadata that Play has about the apps and games that we publish. And with all of this, we have automatically generated curated peer sets. These are essentially sets of apps that have very similar functionality, and you can use one of these sets to compare your performance against. And we even recommend the sets that we think are most suitable for your app or game to be compared with. We will compute benchmarks for all of these peer sets, and we will do so with very strong privacy protection. So no individual app or game's metrics will be able to be reverse engineered from the benchmarks values that we show in the console. And we'll have a total of over 150 peer sets. And these range very much from racing games to wallpaper apps, or from social apps to streaming media. So you'll be able to compare your growth to a benchmark performance computed on a very wide range of these curated peer sets.
And so this is kind of great. And what we found is that the developers who've been able to access this early on or get hints about it and provide feedback are already seeing ways that they can use this to power decision making, to be able to run better experiments. And it feels like, as valuable as this is, what you're talking about, it'd also be really useful if we were to, I don't know, integrate it back into some of the reporting that we already have, the acquisition report we launched last year.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And that's exactly what we intend to do. We intend to bring curated peer sets to the acquisition reports. Now, what acquisition reports show you today is a benchmark that's only computed on a peer set that represents the same Play Store category as your app or game. And this is good when you're looking for that broad market comparison. But it might be a bit limiting if you're looking for a more specific comparison. One example that we hear a lot from you devs is around the maps and navigation category. This navigation contains navigation apps, taxi and ride-sharing apps, train timetable apps, public transportation apps, and so on. And as you can see, these vary widely in functionality. Now, if you're in this category and are looking to compare with your competitors, you probably want to dig a bit deeper than the category level. With curated peer sets, we have created a hierarchical structure, so they will easily allow you to switch between the broad market comparison and the more specific one. And what's even more exciting is whenever it's possible, we're going to let you narrow this down even further. But Fergus is going to be talking more about this in a few minutes.
So this is very, very cool. When can the developers get their hands on it?
So all this will be available soon in the console in the next month or two. So stay tuned for our announcements.
Cool. Thanks, Corina. These are insights. They're really, really powerful, and something that I'm really excited to see being pushed out into the console. Because while my team does work that I really, really enjoy, there's only a small number of us, and everything we can do in the console, it's available and accessible to everybody in this room and every developer around the world. And I really love how all of these insights, especially once you can benchmark your app against a basket of peers, it's going to really contextualize your performance and seriously help you understand what good actually looks like. And what I'm hoping is that you guys are going to be able to get to the point where you can develop really actionable insights based on what you're able to see, and really be much more informed about what good looks like and what your performance is. And so if you think back about this model that I'm talking about, the addressable audience and the data that Tom was talking about, it should really help you actually understand user acquisition, user loss, who's active on any given day, who's actually returning. And one of the neat things is this is just all free benefits you get from publishing on Play. And it's one of those things that's exciting to me working at Google, is that we can actually expose a lot of this to you. But if you think about this model that we're talking about, primarily we've been focusing on that left side of the tree. And the right side is equally important, in some ways even more important, because negative performance, poor user experiences, all of these can drive users out of the game. And if you're an app or a game that does paid user acquisition, you've already spent a lot of money to get them in, so the last thing you want to do is actually lose them. And so I think to understand a lot of that side of the tree, you're going to want much more control about who your competitors are, who's in the peer set. And I'm going to get Fergus to talk about some of the really neat things we're doing to give you a much more intelligent view of your vitals and how you're comparing to competitors.
Well, Adam, as the app ecosystem has become more and more competitive, your app's technical performance has actually become one of its most important features. When we look at the Google Play reviews, we can see that app technical performance has a direct impact on your ratings. Here you can see that 42% of the reviews are talking about bugs and stability alone. And that's why we built Android Vitals into the Play console. Android Vitals provides you over 10 engineering performance metrics, so you can be able to understand how your app is performing across 5 performance areas. Now, I was the founding product manager of Android Vitals, and as part of that, I worked with many experts across Google to invent these new metrics. One of the things we struggled with when we gave these metrics to our early access partners for that program was that they didn't know whether this metric was good or bad. And that's why, when we first launched Android Vitals 2 years ago, we introduced it with the concept of bad behaviors. This is where we flagged the bottom 25% of apps as having a bad behavior, so you knew if you had to improve your performance. Last year at Google I/O, we went one step further, and we introduced category benchmarks. So you were able to understand what percentage of apps in every category were you better than, and so you could be able to invest your resources in the areas that you needed to improve the most. Now, app categories are pretty important, and there are major differences between app categories, as you can see here as an example of slow cold start times. However, as Corina mentioned, app categories are oftentimes too broad, and that's why we're really excited to have curated peer sets. Now, we want to go one step further. Hands up here, who has ever wanted to be able to compare their technical performance with their direct competitors? OK, good stuff. That's pretty much everyone for everyone who's on the videos. We're extremely excited and I'm personally extremely even proud to be able to announce today, developer-selected peer benchmarks. This enables you to be able to select your direct competitors that you want to be able to compare your performance with. And when you do that, you can be able to then see how do you see the peer median for that metric that you're looking at within Vitals, and what is the difference between you and that peer median. Now, the initial peer set is recommended for you. And this is based on many signals. One is the list of similar apps that you see on your Play Store listing. But you can go in and edit the peer set. We have a list of other recommended apps for your peer set. You can also be able to search for an app by name, keyword, or even the package name. And then you can be able to create the peer set. Now, for Vitals, there are some restrictions to how you create the peer set. One is that you have to have between 8 and 12 apps in the peer set. Second is you can only make 3 changes per month. But this still enables you to be able to update your peer set often enough where there are new market entrants. And previous competitors, you can remove that you see as no longer competitors. You can also only select one app from any other developer account and no apps from your own developer account. We've been extremely thoughtful in how we've designed this feature because we value your privacy and your data. If you really want, you can opt out of this program, and there's an opt-out functionality within the preferences section of the console. I'd point out a few things here, though. One is that your Vitals data can be measured oftentimes in a test lab, and the most advanced developers who have the budget already do that today. So we believe that this feature creates more easy access for all developers to be able to understand the core performance metrics that they care about the most from the part of the ecosystem that matters to them. Second is that your data is combined with a set of at least 7 other apps, and only the median of that peer set is shown. Finally, this feature is only available to people who have Vitals data and are above the privacy threshold. So this feature is now available starting today for the performance areas within Vitals of battery, rendering, startup time, and stability. And for the newest area of the Vitals performance product, app size. If you want to learn more about app size, there's a session tomorrow just dedicated to that product at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow at stage 2. So early risers, you got your opportunity. We've had a few developers using this product over the past couple of weeks, and they've really enjoyed it. And we have a quote here from the Gameloft team, where they've been able to prioritize their engineering advancements because they're now able to select the specific apps that match their particular requirements.
Mm-hmm. And this is really cool because in my role, I work with a lot of CXOs, non-technical ones, chief marketing officers, chief product officers, and a lot of them don't have the background or the experience to be able to understand a lot of the really technical nuances. What I think is really valuable here is that business leaders are going to be able to leverage this information to make very informed decisions without needing to be an engineer. And so that's really, really powerful and really exciting. But when I think about public data like ratings, are we going to do anything there to actually let developers see it?
Adam, you might have a future career as a fortune teller because you can predict the future here. That was meant as a joke. OK, so for Vitals, we have some rules. But for ratings, because the data is public and available to all users when they go to the Play Store, we have very little restrictions here. You can be able to go in and select between 1 and 12 apps and be able to see for each individual app what their rating is, how that compares with your rating, and how it compares to the median of the peer set you create. And then you can be able to update this peer set as often as you want. As Corina mentioned, it's really important to understand when you're looking at the trend of your data, how you're performing relative to the benchmark. So for both Vitals and for ratings, we'll show you the peer set median plotted over time along with your data. For ratings, you'll be able to switch between your daily rating and your lifetime rating. Over the past couple of years, we've received a lot of feedback from developers that the Google Play rating that's shown to users on the store has issues. One of the primary ones is that if you had a bad release a few years ago, you're still suffering from that today because it was based on your lifetime rating. So we're really excited to make available a new Google Play rating. This is shown to you today in your rating section of the Play console. However, it will not be shown to users on the store until August of this year. So you have plenty of time to start working on improving your rating and responding to your user reviews to try and improve your rating between now and then. If you go to the ratings details page for any of the breakdowns that we have across country, language, Android version, etc., you can see how your rating compares with each of the breakdowns that are there across the peer set that you create and that you can update as often as you want.
So this is kind of really helpful, and I think it's actually going to provide a lot of intelligence to developers about even where to prioritize user acquisition, which countries are strong, which countries are not. What kind of guidance and advice do you have for everybody here?
Yeah, so I think the top piece of advice here is just to use this feature. Oftentimes, a lot of people within companies don't have access to the Play console. So I'd encourage you to make sure that the people who would get benefit from this product, to get them access to the Play console and share the data as broadly as possible with your colleagues so you know where you can improve and make better data-driven decisions. Now, in terms of how to select your peer set, I'd recommend picking apps that you aspire to be like and updating it when the market changes.
And so, like, all of these benchmarks and everything, really powerful, really insightful, really something that I hope can provide a lot of actionability for you as you look at your game or your app's performance relative to your competitors. And I'm really hopeful that you guys will be able to set targets for future releases, to be able to aspire to make improvements in how you can actually grow your business. And when I really think about everything we've been talking about today, this hierarchical model, how everything feeds together, and all of the features that we're adding to the console, really get inspired, and I really get excited. Because things like refreshing the core metrics, that's going to be significantly more meaningful and significantly more insightful than any of the information we have there today. Additionally, just being able to cut users based on whether they're new or they're returning, it's going to help you kind of decompose your active users and get a sense for how is it growing and shrinking, and just fundamentally, how is that audience changing over time? Additionally, those change analysis charts that Corina was talking about, that's especially important because, as she mentioned, normalized metrics, they're really the fundamental way that you should be evaluating your business. Absolute numbers, revenue, DAU, those are kind of the vanity metrics, and they tend to be lagging indicators. Normalized metrics are more often going to be leading indicators that will provide you with solid science about how your app or game is trending prior to it impacting your daily active users or impacting your revenue. And so, as I think about all of this and how it fits together, user perceptions of quality, vitals, benchmarks, it's going to give all of you in the room, everybody out there in the world, significantly more intelligent insights into just what is the user experience like, how are they enjoying your app or game, and where are the biggest opportunities for you to actually grow, especially in light of the benchmarks that we're actually adding to the console, because now you're going to have a real good understanding of, like, what does good look like? And that was always what I had a problem with when I was on the developer side. What's good? Because as much as I knew everything I could possibly know about my app, I had no idea the competitive landscape. And so this is where we're adding to the console to expose those competitive insights to yourselves and enable you to optimize and grow your business over time. And so thank you all very much for coming today. Hope you all got a lot out of this, and I hope you really get a lot of value out of actually working with the console. Thank you very much.